Hello, and welcome to this presentation on post-pandemic challenges and opportunities for career and technical education in the United States. My name is Chris Zirkle. I'm an associate professor in the College of Education and Human Ecology at The Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. And I would like to thank everyone for this opportunity to present some information to you about our career and technical education system, and specifically some of the things we've been dealing with before the pandemic and directly afterward. I will also say that I am going to be in Taipei in a couple of weeks, and I'll be there until about December the 20th. So I hope to have an opportunity to meet many of you and have some more conversations about career and technical education or vocational education. So without too much more discussion, we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. I should say that in the United States, we changed the name probably 25 years ago to career and technical education. So, I'm old enough that when I first got started, we called it vocational education, but now we call it CTE, or career and technical education, primarily because of the negative perception that surrounded the words vocational education. We also learned that we prepare young people for careers in technical fields. So actually, we think the name is a bit more accurate. But keep in mind that in the United States, we have 50 different states, and every state has their own responsibility for preparing their students. So this is a very general conversation. There may be slight differences between each of the individual states. And I always say when I go overseas, the United States, when it comes to education, is like having 50 different countries because everyone's a bit different. So the outline that I have put together will take a look at the pandemic and education in general across the U.S., a little bit about career tech in the U.S. in general, and then talk about some challenges that we found specific to career and technical education, then a little bit about opportunities that we see for our programs moving forward, and then a short summary. So across the United States, there were certainly significant effects on education, and I'm sure that you experienced many of those in your country as well. And I've tried to break these down into different areas. The first one would be the effects on teaching personnel. A lot of teachers got burned out and got worn out and got very frustrated. And across all the professions in the United States, in terms of people leaving their particular jobs, the teachers were the highest across the board. Teacher morale just went very low, and honestly, it has not fully recovered. And we're still dealing with significant teacher shortages. And, some of this was due to the continual school closures, and then we would reopen, and then some schools would reclose, and then there was reopening. And I think a lot of teachers thought they were a ping pong ball, that they never quite knew what was coming next for them. And we also realized that a lot of our teachers needed significant professional development when it came to teaching online. And obviously, there was an awful lot of lost time with students and a lot of lost instructional time as far as our personnel were concerned. Some general effects on students: there was a loss of social interaction. Students come to class, they come to school to interact, to have social conversations with other students, and there was a significant loss of that. Loss of physical activity because students were sitting in front of a computer screen all day long. And a lot of them experienced mental health challenges. And I'm sad to say that this is a problem that has not dissipated completely. We are still dealing with the after effects of the pandemic as it relates to students' mental health. Obviously, higher rates of absenteeism. A lot of students didn't see the reasons for logging in for 6 or 7 hours a day. So again, a lot of lost instructional time. Students with disabilities that may have needed extra help were cut off from crucial services for long periods of time. So they got further and further behind in their studies. A lot of students depended on schools for lunches and even for breakfasts. And so students experienced food insecurity as a result of the pandemic. And overall, it's fair to say that students were disengaged from school. Some cumulative effects that we found as a result of the pandemic, the student learning loss, and there's been some studies that have shown that students in secondary education fell behind as much as 5 months in math and 4 months in reading. So when you think of a 9-month school year, that's half a year of lost instructional time and lost student achievement for half a year. As a result, too, we had lots of students who dropped out of school, who saw no reason to continue and decided not to return. And as a result as well, we had a lot of students that were not sure where to go, even if they did graduate. And we're just now starting to see university enrollments start to rebound, but we're not sure they're ever going to get back to pre-pandemic levels as far as the number of students enrolled in colleges and universities. And a lot of these effects are more pronounced. They're more likely to occur in low-income families and with disadvantaged students. We learned some other things, one of which was there are distinct differences between the way students utilize technology, maybe, on their phone, and how they use it for socializing and for personal use. And so very different outcomes in terms of how they use technology for learning and for their social life. And actually, we found the same to be true for teachers. And again, this is something that you probably also have experienced, that the effectiveness of virtual learning is influenced one way or another, good or bad, by the teacher's expertise with remote delivery. And many of our schools were completely unprepared for virtual learning. We just didn't see this coming, obviously. And we also realized that many parts of the United States, especially in poor rural areas, did not and maybe are still struggling with putting the technological infrastructure in place to deliver remote learning. So the students didn't have access to the technology, and the schools weren't set up for it either. And even the high-speed access was not in certain parts of the country. So it was a struggle all the way around. So I'm going to shift gears for just a moment and talk about career and technical education. And what about it? And just to give you a little bit of background, I'm not going too deep into our programs, but this is a graphic of the United States educational system in general. Again, some of the different configurations of the elementary and secondary schools can be a bit different, but basically, it's safe to say that career and technical education programs in the United States are in these lightly shaded areas. So the last 2 years of high school, whether it's a 4-year comprehensive high school, whether it's a senior high school, it's a combined junior and senior high school, or it's a vocational center, those are the most likely areas or time frames to see career and technical education programs and courses. The last 2 years of high school, grades 11 and 12. And then a lot of it also takes place in our 2-year institutions, our community colleges, and our technical colleges. We are starting to see, and I'll talk a little bit later about the growth at some of the lower levels, middle school, junior high school, grades 6 through 7, 8, maybe up to 9. The middle grades, we're starting to see more and more programming at those grade levels as well. But this gives you a little bit of a picture of how our educational system is structured and where you would find our career and technical education programs. A little bit of history. Our programs have been funded by the United States government for almost a little bit more than 100 years now. The federal government said every state must offer career and technical education courses and programs to their students. And these are the 6 primary areas where you would find courses or programs. And you can see underneath the broad or the bold headings some of the specific courses that you would find. For example, under agriculture education, you might find a course on production ag or agricultural mechanics or something in horticulture. So you can see how the 6 different areas break down in terms of what kinds of courses you would find underneath of those headings. The purposes, and this is where I think there's been very significant change in the last 30 years or so. Vocational education, if we go back pre-1998 and maybe even a little bit farther, historically, they had one goal, one focus, and that was the development of entry-level skills. Students who went into vocational education programs at that point in time in that level of high school, they wanted to get out of high school, hopefully with a high school diploma, and go into the workforce. Now we see our programs are focused a lot more broadly. We still have that goal because we still have students that want to get entry-level jobs that at least at that point in their lives, they're not interested in going on to school. So they need basic skills to get an entry-level job, and we still provide that. But we have many more students who are going on to that technical college or the community college. Many still that are preparing to go to the university. And then we have some other options for them. We have an apprenticeship model that's very similar to the ones that you would find in Europe. And those are primarily found in some of the building trades, the construction area. We have other students that go into the military, and the military is a big provider of technical skill preparation. We have a number of adults. A lot of our high school programs run during the daytime, and then the buildings are open in the evenings, and there are adults that are coming back to school to get retrained, to learn new skills because they want a new job or they want to advance in their present position. So career and technical education has become more and more attractive to adults looking to improve their situation. And we have also invested in career and technical training for folks who have made mistakes. So maybe people who are part of our prison system, our correctional education programs are there for them to get another opportunity. And because we've realized that many of them will get out at some point and they need skills, they need an education, or otherwise they're going to be back in the same situation. So you can see that over the years, there's a much broader focus on the goals and objectives of career and technical education. And those are listed here. And I've already mentioned many of them. We want to prepare students for entry-level jobs. We want them to develop technical skills. We want them to also develop soft skills. And this is an area where we hear consistently from employers. And I think the pandemic, unfortunately, has made this worse because the number one skill that I listed there, interpersonal skills. We have a generation or part of a generation of students that have grown up staring at a computer screen for 2 or so years. So their interpersonal skills are perhaps not what they should be. But we continue to work on those, developing those kinds of skills, problem-solving skills, and the development of a good work ethic. We want our career and technical education programs to also help students utilize their academic skills, because you can't be successful in any occupation if you have poor reading skills, poor math skills. So we integrate those closely into our CTE curriculums. And then we also want to make sure we're preparing students for further continuous education. We realize that the workplace, you can't stand still. You have to keep developing yourself, keep educating yourself. So we try to instill that into our students. And then here are some of the outcomes that we would like to see. Obviously, people with jobs, students with technical skill expertise, students who are ready for the world of work and they know what the world of work expects from them. They have academic skills and they can adapt and they can think on their feet and adapt to change. And then also important is that they are ready to continue their education if they want to, and they know what their options are. So if we think about some of the post-pandemic challenges that we have that are specifically for career and technical education, I can think of several, one of which is teacher shortages. And honestly, this is a problem across all of our educational system, not just in career and technical education. And it existed before the pandemic, and now it's just been made worse. And there's some reasons for that. One is that overall teaching is not necessarily a well-paid nor prestigious occupation. It's slowly, I think we're starting to realize that we need to pay our teachers more. But I think if you asked any student what occupation would you go into if you wanted to make lots of money, teaching would not be at the top of the list. So it's not well paid. We have a challenge recruiting high quality career and technical education teachers from industry because the private sector, private industry pays so much more. So for example, if you are an auto mechanic and you work at a Toyota dealership or a Ford dealership, you can make considerably more money than you would as a teacher. So it's difficult to convince those individuals to cross over into teaching, because we want those individuals to have that work experience that they can bring into the classroom. And so not only is it a problem recruiting them, it's been a problem retaining them. So we might be able to get some of those individuals to come to teaching, but sometimes it's difficult to keep them because they realize how challenging teaching can be. And then also lots of times the companies that they work for will call them and say, please come back and we will give you a significant salary increase. And so some of them go back for that reason. So the pandemic, we had teacher shortages before that, but the pandemic has only made it worse. A lack of student engagement. And this is a really big problem for career and technical education, because a lot of the students gravitate toward our programs because it's active learning. It's hands-on activities. And we have a group of students now that didn't get that earlier exposure to career and technical education, and we're trying to get them caught up. The development of technical skills is all about practice. You need practice to develop technical expertise, and a lot of that practice time was lost during the pandemic. So we have a group of students that don't have the same level of technical expertise as some of their, the ones that came before them, or even the ones that are in our programs now where we're pretty much back to normal. So we've got that group that lost that engagement. The pace of technological change. The pandemic went on, and the change in technology and the change in the workplace obviously also went on. And schools, at least in the United States, are always a step behind. It's a bit of a bureaucracy in many cases. to keep up with technology, to keep up with the latest equipment. And so schools are always trying to get back to normal. And we're slowly getting there now, but it's we're still feeling the effects of the pandemic. And then related to that is this idea of technical skill upgrades for our teachers. Because not only did schools have to keep revising and upgrading their curriculum, their facilities, and their equipment, the teachers are also trying to catch up. And we found that many of our teachers, again, were not equipped to teach online. And how do you teach technical skill development through a Zoom or Teams meeting? It's very difficult, if not impossible. So how do we get our teachers up to speed with using technology in an effective way? And then how do we get those teachers to have continued access to training themselves, not only pedagogical training to improve their teaching skills, but keeping their technical skills up to speed as well? And then if we do send teachers into training, and it's during the school year, who teaches the students then? We have also a shortage of substitute teachers who can come in and fill in if one of the teachers is absent. They went to training. So, and then the other issue is how to pay for the training. So lots of challenges associated with technical skill upgrades and professional development since the pandemic. Unequal access. One thing that the pandemic brought out was we have unequal situations when it comes to education. We obviously have some very excellent high schools, career centers, vocational centers. And then we have some that need some work and need some help. And we have also student populations. We have some very excellent, obviously very talented, very bright young people in our schools. We also have students who maybe have potential barriers, students with disabilities, students who are economically disadvantaged, students of color, students in single parent families. They don't always have the same opportunities. They don't always have access to the same resources. And I mentioned 50 different states. We have some states that fund career and technical education at high levels, and some that don't. And so the quality in one state may be considerably higher than the quality in another. So what some of those more, I guess, enthusiastic states about career and technical education, one of the things they're doing is starting to offer career and technical education at earlier grades, middle schools, to help those students make some choices. And I'll show you a slide about that here in a moment. So providing that early experience, but there's definitely unequal access. We certainly have some haves and some have-nots when it comes to access to career and technical education programs. And the pandemic has really made us see those differences. So if we change gears now and talk a little bit about some opportunities that I see coming out of the pandemic, if there can be some good ones. One of them is the changing perceptions. Right now, we have a significant shortage of skilled labor, and we have an economy that's, it's rebounding. It's doing much better since the pandemic, but it could be even better if we had more carpenters, more welders, more people with technical expertise to help build things, fix things, move the country forward. So we are beginning to see, and again, the pandemic brought this out, that those essential workers were critical for keeping the country running. And somewhat as a result, we've seen the wages of some of those jobs go up considerably. And there are a lot of jobs now that you don't need a bachelor's degree to make a good living. And indeed, some of the jobs that can be obtained through maybe a 2-year degree in a technical field can certainly be higher than those of individuals with a bachelor's degree. And you can get through the programs quicker, and that leads to less student debt for mom and dad. Students are more interested now, it seems, in career and technical education courses and programs. I work with a number of career centers here in Ohio, and every single one of them has seen significant increases in student enrollment in their career and technical education programs. The problem is now they're running out of space. They have to turn students away, which was not a problem 10 years ago, but it is now. Students, and especially parents, are realizing the value of our programs. So it's growing in popularity. I mentioned this a moment ago. We are introducing career and technical education to earlier grades and younger students. A lot of the issues around school dropout for our students in the United States occur around the 9th grade. It's the transition between the middle grades and high school, the high school grades. And so what we're trying to do is give students a career direction in those earlier grades, so they see a reason for staying in school. So you can see this is a continuum that the state of Ohio developed, that in the elementary grades, kindergarten through grade 5, they're going to focus on career awareness activities, letting students know what kinds of careers are out there. And then exploration in the middle grades to give students an opportunity to actually do some hands-on activities in their classes in those middle grades to develop some idea of what opportunities are out there, so that when they get into high school, they have a plan. They are not trying to figure out what direction do I go when they get into high school. So this is an area that is really taken off after the pandemic. We've realized that we need to provide students with more direction in terms of their career opportunities. We've also seen more employer involvement in the past, and I can go back to when I was in high school and in college. We didn't have a lot of partnerships with companies, with industries for CTE programs. But now what we see is that 70% of all employers in the United States in a recent survey said, we need people. We are searching for specific talent. We can't find it. And so a lot of employers now have said, okay, we're going to be part of the solution. And there have been many, many more companies that are willing to develop partnerships with our schools and provide work-based learning opportunities, things like internships and cooperative education, and even job shadowing, spending a day in a company. So this is one area that has also grown post-pandemic, and I'm very pleased and encouraged to see it because it's taken a long time to get there. We've also seen increased funding in many states for career and technical education. And I put this in here, you know, if you follow American politics right now, you know that we're very divided about lots of different things. But it's interesting, the funding for career and technical education is one of the few things that most politicians agree on. And as a result, many states have increased their funding for career and technical education. And you can see for fiscal year, for this year, the state of Ohio, where I live, obviously, allocated an additional $300 million total in funding for facility growth, to build new buildings and to provide more equipment for programs. So that's a significant growth in funding. And I think we're going to see more and more students in programs and more schools offering additional career and technical education programs. So the funding has really turned a corner as a result of the pandemic. So just to summarize very briefly from these slides, just a couple of key ideas. the big one for me is CTE is becoming a first choice option for students. For decades, vocational education was seen as second class, the place where the students who couldn't go to university would go, or the students who were troublemakers or had bad grades, we would send them to a vocational program. That has completely flipped now, and we see those negative perceptions going away. They're not entirely gone, but there's now a realization among parents and policymakers that career and technical education is highly needed, and it provides lots of great opportunities for young people. Graduates of the programs are highly employable. And again, I said sometimes, or many cases, the wages are comparable to four-year university graduates. We have high school graduates from career and technical education programs making $60,000 to $70,000 US per year. That's more than many four-year college graduates. So I think that's fantastic. And then there are now continued developments with curriculum, so that if a student wants to go on from a high school career and technical education program, they can go to a technical college or a community college, and they can perhaps even earn college credits while they're in high school. We have dual credit programs where students can earn credit for high school graduation and also credit toward an associate or bachelor's degree. So we've put in these incentives into the curriculum to encourage students to keep going. And it's really taken off. And the last thing I would say, that vocational education used to be somewhat of a dead end for students. It had one option and one option only. And that's no longer true with our career and technical education programs. So I'm just I think this is a great time to be involved with career and technical education. Unfortunately, we had the pandemic, but I think as a result of that, we've realized a lot of things about our educational system, and certainly we've learned the value of our career and technical education programs. So I'm just really pleased with what I've seen post-pandemic. So that's what I have for my presentation. Again, I will be in Taipei soon, and I hope to have an opportunity to meet with some of you and have continued conversations. So I want to thank you for your time.